The reconnaissance aircraft drones through the Pacific sky, its engine a monotonous hum against the
Rumors I've
vast
heard
blue
since then,
expanse below.
this impressed the Russians quite a bit.
It's
This
May
great big
1944,
aircraft and a full
and
crew would be
Lieutenant
deployed
Commander
in there. Just
Hiroshi
picked up.
Yamamoto peers through his viewfinder at the sprawling anchorage of Ulithi Atoll, 1,200 miles north of New Guinea. What he sees through that lens will haunt him for the rest of his life. The American fleet stretches to the horizon, more ships than Japan ever possessed at its peak. But it's not the carriers or battleships that make Yamamoto's hands tremble as he adjusts his camera. It's something else entirely. Something that doesn't belong in any naval manual he's ever studied. Below, anchored among the warships, like some industrial aberration, sits a gray concrete barge. 300 feet of utilitarian ugliness that seems to serve no military purpose whatsoever. Small craft swarm around it like worker bees, constantly loading and unloading mysterious cargo. Heavy refrigeration equipment dominates its deck, visible even from this altitude. "What are they doing down there?" Yamamoto whispers to himself, the camera clicking rapidly as he captures frame after frame of the enigmatic vessel. The official designation will later read unknown logistics vessel, but that clinical language fails to capture the growing dread in his stomach. This isn't how wars are supposed to be fought. In the Imperial Japanese Navy, every gram of steel, every drop of fuel, every grain of rice is precious, allocated with mathematical precision to maximize fighting capability. Resources flow to weapons, to engines, to ammunition, not to mysterious concrete barges with refrigeration units that serve no apparent tactical purpose. But here it is, this floating riddle that defies everything Yamamoto knows about naval warfare. The Americans have dedicated an entire vessel, complete with escort craft and supply lines, to something his trained military mind cannot comprehend. The implications claw at him as his aircraft banks away from the atoll. What kind of enemy has resources so abundant, so inexhaustible, that they can waste entire ships on non-essential operations? What does this say about American industrial capacity? About their confidence in ultimate victory? The photographs in Yamamoto's camera will reach Naval Intelligence Headquarters in Tokyo within days. They'll be studied by the finest analytical minds in the Imperial Navy. Officers who planned Pearl Harbor, who orchestrated the conquest of Southeast Asia, will pore over every detail of these images. But none of them, not Yamamoto, not the intelligence analysts, not even Admiral Takajiro Onishi himself, will guess the truth about that concrete barge. Because the truth is so impossibly extravagant, so fundamentally alien to Japanese military thinking, that it exists outside the realm of their imagination. How could they possibly know that America had built ships dedicated entirely to ice cream production? How could warriors raised on sacrifice and scarcity comprehend an enemy that could afford floating dessert factories? The reconnaissance photos are already sealing Japan's psychological defeat. The question isn't whether this mysterious vessel will change the course of the war. It's whether Japan can psychologically survive what it represents. In the sterile corridors of Imperial Navy headquarters, the photographs land on mahogany desks like harbingers of doom. Vice Admiral Takajiro Onishi, the brilliant tactical mind behind the Kamikaze Corps, spreads the reconnaissance images across his desk with the methodical precision of a surgeon examining a terminal diagnosis. Onishi had built his reputation on understanding the enemy. He'd correctly predicted that Pearl Harbor would only enrage America into total war. He'd grasped earlier than most that Japan's window for victory was measured in months, not years. But these photographs present him with something unprecedented, evidence that challenges the very foundations of Japanese military philosophy. Concrete barge number 149, his aide reads from the intelligence report. Primary function unknown, Heavy refrigeration equipment visible. Continuous logistics activity observed. No apparent weapons systems. The Admiral's fingers trace the outline of the mysterious vessel. For 3 years, Japan has been engaged in total war. Every citizen on reduced rations, every factory converted to military production, every resource channeled toward the singular goal of victory. Children collect scrap metal for ammunition. Housewives donate cooking pots to build aircraft. The entire nation has embraced the Bushido concept of victory through sacrifice. And yet America can afford mystery ships. Sir, the aide continues hesitantly, there have been other reports. Disturbing reports from our intelligence network. Onishi looks up. The young officer's face carries the expression of a man about to deliver unwelcome news. Continue. Interrogations of returned personnel indicate that American forces possess luxuries, sir, items that serve no military function. The word hangs in the air like smoke from burning incense. Luxuries. In the Japanese military lexicon, it's almost obscene. While Japanese soldiers subsist on rice balls and seaweed soup, while pilots fly aircraft held together with bamboo and prayers, the Americans apparently indulge in non-essential consumption. What kind of luxuries? Onishi's voice carries the steel edge that made subordinates choose their words carefully. Chocolate bars, sir, universally available, and a carbonated beverage called Coca-Cola. Intelligence indicates it costs 5 American cents and is provided with every meal. Onishi's jaw tightens. He's heard whispers of American abundance from prisoners and intelligence operatives, but he's dismissed them as propaganda or exaggeration. No military force could sustain such waste. No industrial economy could afford such frivolity while prosecuting global warfare. Could they? There's more, Admiral. The aide's voice drops to barely above a whisper. Our agents report that large American vessels are equipped with facilities for producing frozen desserts. Ice cream, sir. The words land like physical blows. Ice cream. While Japanese civilians queue for hours to receive their meager rations, while soldiers in the field go days without adequate food, the Americans are manufacturing frozen desserts at sea. The cognitive dissonance is staggering. Onishi stands and walks to the window overlooking Tokyo Bay. The harbor that once bustled with merchant vessels now holds only naval craft, destroyers and cruisers that burn precious fuel, submarines that consume irreplaceable resources. Every decision is weighed against scarcity. Every operation measured against diminishing reserves. But what if your enemy operated from a position of such overwhelming abundance that they could build ships for ice cream? The implications cascade through his strategic mind like falling dominoes. If America can afford floating dessert factories, what does that say about their production capacity, their resource allocation, their confidence in victory? A military force that provides luxury goods to its troops isn't desperate. It's not rationing. It's not even particularly concerned about efficiency. It's showing off. Admiral, the aide ventures, should we include these details in the general intelligence briefing? Onishi turns from the window, his face a mask of controlled concern. As the architect of the kamikaze program, he understands better than anyone how the war has become a contest of morale as much as material. Japanese fighting spirit, the willingness to die rather than surrender, to sacrifice everything for emperor and nation, represents their only remaining advantage. But what happens to fighting spirit when soldiers learn that their enemy considers the war so trivial that they manufacture ice cream at sea? What happens to the mythology of Japanese superiority when confronted with evidence of such casual American abundance? The frozen dessert intelligence threatens something more dangerous than military defeat. It threatens psychological collapse. No, Onishi says finally, this information is classified, highest levels only. because he knows, with the clarity that made him one of Japan's most feared tactical minds, that his own forces couldn't psychologically survive this knowledge. The Americans aren't just winning the material war, they're fighting it with one hand tied behind their backs, casually producing luxuries while Japanese forces scrounge for basic necessities. Outside his window, Tokyo Bay reflects the afternoon sun like molten steel. Somewhere beyond that horizon, American concrete barges are manufacturing ice cream by the ton while Japanese pilots prepare for suicide missions with stomachs cramped from hunger. The reconnaissance photographs aren't just intelligence reports. They're evidence of a fundamental miscalculation that began at Pearl Harbor. The assumption that fighting spirit could overcome industrial might. That sacrifice could defeat abundance. That a nation willing to die could beat a nation that didn't even need to try very hard. The war isn't just lost. It was always unwinnable. The ice cream ships prove it. October 25th, 1944. The Battle of Cape Engano has just ended in devastating defeat for the Imperial Japanese Navy. The aircraft carrier Zuikaku, pride of the fleet, veteran of Pearl Harbor, lies broken beneath Pacific waves, taking with her the last remnants of Japan's naval aviation power. But for the handful of survivors pulled from those dark waters by American destroyers, the real shock is only beginning. Seaman First Class Kenji Nakamura coughs up seawater as strong hands haul him aboard the USS Destroyer. His body shakes from cold and exhaustion, his mind reeling from watching his ship, his home for 3 years, disappear beneath the waves. He expects death, or at best, the harsh treatment that Japanese propaganda has promised awaits those captured by American barbarians. Instead, he's wrapped in a clean blanket and guided to the ship's mess hall. The American sailor, a kid who couldn't be older than 19, sets a tray in front of Nakamura with the casual efficiency of a seasoned waiter. Rice. Real meat, not the mysterious protein substitutes that had become standard aboard Japanese vessels. Bread so white it seems impossibly luxurious. And then, almost as an afterthought, something Nakamura has never seen before. A small bowl filled with what appears to be frozen sweetened cream, white as fresh snow, cold as a mountain stream, decorated with a single red cherry that looks like a jewel against the pale surface. Ice cream, the American explains in broken Japanese, noticing Nakamura's bewildered expression. Vanilla. Sorry there's no chocolate today. We ran out this morning, but the supply barge will be here tomorrow with fresh stock. The words hit Nakamura like artillery fire. Supply barge for ice cream. Tomorrow, fresh stock. His hands tremble as he lifts the spoon, not from cold or fear, but from the crushing realization of what this moment represents. The frozen dessert touches his tongue and explodes into sensations he lacks vocabulary to describe. Sweet, rich, cold fire that somehow warms his soul. But the taste is secondary to the implications. America has supply barges dedicated to ice cream. Around him, other Zuikaku survivors experience their own moments of revelation. Chief Petty Officer Yamato, a veteran of 20 years naval service, stares at his tray as if it contains classified documents. The portion sizes alone defy comprehension. More food than a Japanese sailor received in a week, served casually as a single meal. This is standard? Yamato asks in halting English. The young American crewman nods matter-of-factly. 3 meals a day, plus gedunk. That's what we call the ice cream and snacks. Admiral's orders, happy sailors fight better. Happy sailors? The concept is so alien to Japanese military philosophy that Yamato struggles to process it. Japanese warriors are motivated by duty, by honor, by fear of shame. Happiness is irrelevant. Comfort is weakness. Luxury is corruption. But what happens when your enemy's definition of standard operations includes frozen desserts? Meanwhile, in the destroyer's radio room, another piece of intelligence flows toward Tokyo that will send shockwaves through Imperial headquarters. The radio operator, monitoring American communications frequencies, intercepts routine logistics chatter that reads like fantasy. Ice cream barge proceeding to Station Baker. Current production rate 5 tons daily. Requesting chocolate syrup resupply for tomorrow's vanilla service. 5 tons daily. From a single barge. The operator checks his equipment twice, convinced he's misunderstood. But the transmission is clear, repeated multiple times across different frequencies. America operates floating ice cream factories that produce industrial quantities of frozen desserts for distribution to combat forces. The intelligence reaches Admiral Onishi's desk within hours, adding another devastating data point to his growing file of American abundance reports. He spreads the latest reconnaissance photographs across his mahogany surface, images of concrete barge number 149 surrounded by smaller craft, all engaged in what can only be described as dessert logistics operations. But it's the personal testimonies from the Zukaku survivors that finally break through his psychological defenses. Their interrogation reports read like fever dreams. The American crewman apologized that there was no chocolate ice cream available. He said the supply ship would arrive the following day with fresh flavors. They served 3 complete meals, plus additional food items they called snacks. More nutrition than our combat rations provided in a full week. When I asked if this was special treatment for prisoners, they seemed confused. They said this was standard for all American personnel. Standard. The word appears repeatedly in the reports, each instance hammering home the scale of American material superiority. What Japanese forces consider impossible luxury, American forces treat as routine entitlement. Onishi sets down the reports and walks to his office safe. Inside, a growing collection of intelligence documents paint a picture so psychologically devastating that he's classified the entire file beyond top secret. Evidence of American abundance that would shatter Japanese morale if it became widely known. Ice cream ships, Coca-Cola factories in combat zones, chocolate bars distributed like ammunition, industrial, quantities of luxury goods flowing to combat forces while Japanese troops subsist on grass soup and tree bark. But the most devastating report sits at the top of the pile. An intelligence summary from the Battle of the Coral Sea 2 years earlier. When the USS Lexington received the order to abandon ship, American sailors had paused their evacuation to raid the ship's ice cream storage. They filled their helmets with frozen dessert before jumping overboard, treating ice cream as more valuable than personal equipment. The image sears itself into Onishi's strategic consciousness. Enemy sailors so confident of their industrial support that they prioritize ice cream over survival gear. Warriors so certain of ultimate victory that they can afford to value comfort over efficiency. This isn't just military superiority, it's psychological warfare on an existential level. The Admiral opens his desk drawer and removes a red ink stamp marked Classified Imperial Eyes Only. With deliberate precision, he marks every document in the ice cream file, because he understands with crystal clarity what this intelligence represents. Japan has been fighting the wrong war. While Japanese strategy focused on maximizing fighting spirit through sacrifice and scarcity, America has been demonstrating that overwhelming abundance eliminates the need for sacrifice entirely. Why endure hardship when you can manufacture comfort? Why accept scarcity when you possess unlimited resources? The philosophical foundations of Japanese military doctrine, that suffering builds strength, that sacrifice ensures victory, that material disadvantage can be overcome through spiritual superiority, crumble in the face of American ice cream ships. Outside his window, Tokyo bustles with the controlled desperation of total war mobilization. Civilians queue for rice rations. Factories work around the clock to produce weapons from salvaged materials. Children collect scrap metal to support the war effort. But somewhere in the Pacific, American concrete barges churn out 5 tons of ice cream daily while their crews apologize for temporary chocolate shortages. The war isn't just lost, it was always unwinnable. The ice cream ships prove that America was never really trying. They've been fighting with infinite resources against an enemy operating at the edge of starvation, and they've been so confident of victory that they could afford to build floating dessert factories. Onishi closes the classified file and locks it in his safe. The intelligence will go no further, because the truth about American ice cream ships isn't just militarily significant, it's psychologically lethal. It represents the final proof that Japan challenged an enemy so overwhelmingly superior that they could treat global warfare as a minor inconvenience, solved through industrial abundance rather than human sacrifice. The concrete barges aren't just making ice cream. They're manufacturing the evidence of Japan's inevitable defeat, one frozen dessert at a time. The war ended 9 months later, but for the Japanese officers who knew about the ice cream ships, the psychological defeat had come much earlier. In prisoner of war camps across the Pacific, captured Japanese personnel encountered the full scope of American abundance and discovered that the frozen desserts were merely the visible tip of an industrial iceberg that defied comprehension. Admiral Onishi never lived to see Japan's surrender. He committed seppuku on August 16, 1945, leaving behind a final testament that spoke of inexcusable responsibility for leading young men to their deaths. But those who knew him understood that his decision stemmed from more than military failure. It came from the crushing realization that Japan had challenged an enemy so fundamentally different that victory was never even theoretically possible. The ice cream intelligence had revealed something more devastating than American military superiority. It exposed the complete bankruptcy of Japanese strategic thinking. While Japan mobilized its entire society for total war, America fought with such overwhelming abundance that it could afford to treat global conflict as background noise to normal industrial operations. Think about the mathematics of that revelation. While Japanese forces scrounged for basic supplies and converted pine trees into aviation fuel, America operated floating factories producing 5 tons of ice cream daily. Not because ice cream was militarily essential, but because happy soldiers fight better. The philosophical gap wasn't just enormous, it was unbridgeable. But here's what makes this story relevant today. The ice cream ships represent something larger than World War II logistics. They demonstrate how industrial capacity, properly leveraged, becomes a form of psychological warfare that defeats enemies before battles are even fought. Modern military analysts study the Pacific War and focus on aircraft production numbers, naval tonnage, and strategic resources. They miss the deeper lesson that the ice cream ships taught Japanese leaders. Wars aren't won by the most dedicated warriors. They're won by societies that can afford to maintain normalcy during crisis. While Japan demanded total sacrifice from its population, America maintained civilian living standards that exceeded Japanese peacetime prosperity. While Japanese soldiers faced starvation, American troops complained about temporary chocolate shortages in their ice cream supplies. The message was unmistakable. America wasn't even really trying yet. The Zuikaku survivors who tasted ice cream for the first time in American POW camps carried that memory back to post-war Japan. They became witnesses to a different model of national power, one based on abundance rather than sacrifice, industrial might rather than spiritual strength, systematic capability rather than individual heroism. Their testimonies helped reshape Japan's understanding of what modern warfare actually required. not the ability to endure suffering, but the capacity to eliminate suffering through overwhelming productivity. Today, when we examine global power structures, the ice cream ship principle remains relevant. Nations that can afford to provide luxury goods to their military forces while conducting operations aren't just demonstrating wealth. They're sending a psychological message about the sustainability of their efforts. They're saying, this isn't even difficult for us. It's the same principle that governs modern corporate competition, technological development, and international relations. The most powerful players aren't those who can endure the most hardship. They're those who can make hardship irrelevant through superior systems and resources. The Japanese officers who discovered America's ice cream ships learned this lesson at the cost of their entire worldview. They realized they'd been fighting not just a different military, but a fundamentally different kind of civilization, one that could afford to manufacture comfort while manufacturing victory. That could prioritize morale while prioritizing effectiveness. That could treat global warfare as a logistics problem to be solved rather than a spiritual test to be endured. The concrete barges that churned out 5 tons of ice cream daily weren't just feeding American sailors. They were demonstrating the mathematical impossibility of Japanese victory. Because any nation that could dedicate entire ships to frozen dessert production while fighting a global war possessed resources so vast that military defeat of such a power was simply beyond Japanese capability. Perhaps that's the ultimate lesson of the ice cream ships. True strategic superiority isn't demonstrated through suffering or sacrifice, but through the ability to maintain abundance even under pressure. It's not about how much hardship you can endure. It's about how much hardship you can eliminate. The next time you enjoy ice cream, remember that you're participating in a small act of abundance that once symbolized the difference between victory and defeat in the largest conflict in human history. What would the Japanese officers who discovered those ice cream ships think about our world today, where frozen desserts are so common we barely consider them remarkable? They might recognize it as proof that abundance, once achieved, becomes the foundation for even greater abundance. What surprising lessons about power and abundance have you discovered in your own life? Share your thoughts in the comments below, and don't forget to subscribe for more untold stories from history that reveal the hidden forces shaping our world.